time for the first time using StreamYard as our um, little, I guess, third party like YouTube assistant broadcasting tool. RIP Google Hangouts that died at the end of August, I guess it was. This I've used this on another friend of ours, his podcast, and seems to work pretty well. So hopefully it's syncing up with YouTube okay. But we are here to talk about something completely different from what the kind of stuff that we normally talk about, which is usually either Marvel or what's the other thing that we talk about?
We talk about Cobra Kai. I mean, pretty much any kind of like nostalgia or comic book related properties.
Right. Yeah. That's been our two that we've been really consistent with is Marvel and not just Marvel, but DC. But DC talks end up becoming about Marvel. So basically Marvel, and then Cobra Kai. So this is completely different. This is a family drama. This Is Us. But before we get to that, we always have some sort of little intro about what's kind of going on in the news, usually something that's completely unrelated. And so this week we saw some stuff with reboots. Not that there's a week that goes by that we don't see something with reboots, but there was one in particular that was of interest to us, which was the pending Saved by the Bell remake, right?
Yeah. So
or not a remake. Is it a remake, or what would you call this one? This one's like I guess kind of like a sequel or a reboot, or I don't know.
Yeah, like a reboot-quel or something.
Yeah, right.
I don't know. It's got a little bit of flavor from both sides of it. For starters, NBC announced their streaming channel that'll be coming out, which I think is being called Peacock. Which I mean, they the logo, but still.
Yeah. Okay. Well, questionable already, but okay.
Sure. And they're looking to revive some of the NBC properties. I also read that they're reviving Battlestar Galactica.
I saw that too. Yeah.
In what variation? I didn't dig very deep into that, so I don't know if it's the more revered recent version of it, or they're going way back to revisit the 70s or 80s iteration.
Well, and basically the more recent one was just kind of an adaptation of that, So, and yeah, man, it hasn't been long since, I mean, in the overall grand scheme of things, it hasn't been long since the most recent one went off the air,
Yeah.
And
I mean, 2008, 2009, maybe.
Yeah, I don't remember. Somewhere I think in there. It's not been long, but I was a huge, and maybe it's been, I don't know, it could have been a few years more than that, but I was a big fan of it, so it feels recent to me, at least.
Yeah. Well, that was one of the first shows I can remember, Lost maybe being another one, that had this like immediate cultural impact, and this kind of transitions into This Is Us. It shares a similarity for me personally, anyways. That
right.
It had this like immediate cultural impact in its first run, but it was also on the air at a time where streaming was just slowly getting to become popular with people.
Right.
So like it's almost as if it achieved a second life.
Yeah.
In streaming services. So after the show is off the air, it's like its shelf life was extended because people who like maybe couldn't keep up with it week to week, with it being sort of one of those appointment viewing shows, could rediscover it and then start to binge it. And so, which is how I found Battlestar Galactica. I couldn't keep up with it in its current form because I devoted so much time to Lost and other shows like it. But so I ended up finding that show much later. And so, in a way, it may have been like 10 years or something since it's been on the air, but for a lot of people, it's a lot less than that. And so, it does seem a little recent for it to be doing that. So, you may hear my printer. I'm sorry, I'm sitting right
Okay.
next to it. And that's my poor choice for seating arrangements.
That's okay.
So anyway, so that could be a thing. So anyway, so they're rebooting some of their properties, and Punky Brewster was one of them. And I don't know if you were.
I remember
into
Punky
that.
Brewster.
Listen, I love a good fostering story, but I don't know if that necessarily was a good one.
I think Punky Brewster kind of runs together with Different Strokes for me.
It is. It's kind of the same story, but with all white people.
Yeah.
I
remember a crazy, it's funny what sticks in your mind. And this is definitely, it's a rabbit trail, but it's a short rabbit trail. I remember like a Punky Brewster episode where it was like, I think it ended up being like a nightmare or a nightmare or something of where, I've got to go look this up. I'll have to go look this up afterwards, but it was something like she was trapped in some sort of like, horror type thing or something. I don't know. I want to see if I just imagine that or not now. But
the only thing I remember about Punky Brewster was they had one of those very special episodes where one of the kids played hide and seek under a refrigerator and passed out or something, and it was kind of like don't lock yourself in refrigerators, you might die.
Yeah,
like
right.
There was some epidemic in America at that time. But so anyway, Saved by the Bell. So
yeah.
If I can put out a plug for a channel and series that I don't know anyone who's involved with, but on Facebook there is a page called Zach Morris's Trash.
Yes.
That revisits a lot of classic episodes of Saved by the Bell, as anyone who's familiar with this conversation is familiar with, and revisits them in sort of a objective, critical context of like the kind of terrible person that Zach was.
A real world context too.
Yeah.
Saved by the Bell was sort of this, even though it was like a high school drama, it was sort of this like, I don't know if like heightened reality would be the proper term, but I mean, Zach could call timeouts and freeze time, and stuff like that. And so you have to kind of like, look at it through that lens, but like this takes a very like, straightforward, like if this was a real person or if this was like a, regular drama or something, Zach Morris would be a terrible human being.
He was like a non-violent adolescent Deadpool of sorts. Like, just fourth wall breaking, totally self-serving, but positioned as the protagonist anyways.
He was a far less annoying, and I mean far less annoying. He was charming in a certain sort of way, but he had like kind of the same like sociopathic tendencies as, say, a Jake Paul.
He did have a problem with his teachers not teaching him anything.
Yeah, right. Yeah, he was like, I feel like Jake Paul is just playing, like he's just conning everyone, and he just modeled, like Jake Paul's actually like this nerdy like bookworm, and he just based a character off of Zach Morris and then gave it like an artistic interpretation as a YouTuber in 2019.
So this Teen 10, is that really like the Zach Attack? Is that who they are?
Maybe so. Yeah, maybe so. It's like it's the gang. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's every day. Bro.
Yes. Yeah.
So anyway, Zach Morris is trash. If you ever have any time to kill on Facebook,
it is great.
So they're rebooting this series, and I have a log line description of the proposed new series. From, I don't know if this is from Variety or from NBC or whatever, or if it was just pulled from NBC. The log line is, when California Governor Zach Morris gets into hot water for closing too many low-income schools, he proposes they send the affected students to the highest performing schools in the state, including Bayside High. the influx of new students gives the overprivileged Bayside kids a much needed and hilarious
And
dose of reality. I mean, just start printing the checks now. I mean, the only thing even remotely
Man.
like logically connecting to that old series is overprivileged Bayside kids. I
Yes. Yes.
think. This is almost like, this is like Saved by the Bell meets Mighty Ducks 2, when the kids from South Central teach the Ducks how to play aggressively on the street courts or something. But oh man, it sounds terrible. But like the real question is it terrible enough to turn back around and be good again? And I just don't know. The thing that sticks out to me, which like really doesn't matter, but I can't let it go, so I'm just going to say it anyways, is that the idea of Zach being the governor of California, when they literally did have an episode where he ran for class president just so he could get a free field trip. And when he actually got a taste of the work that's involved in politics, he wanted nothing to do with it.
I'd forgotten about that. Yeah.
I can't believe that I remembered it when I read that. And so I'm just like, oh boy, this is a stretch. Like, I mean, even for this.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
so I don't know.
It's interesting because, so I guess we should point out that Slater and Jesse, Mario Lopez, and what's the girl's name? Elizabeth
Berkley.
Berkley, yeah. They are both attached to it, and we don't know, right? Wasn't that in there?
Yeah, I mean, I did see their, they are.
Yeah. So we don't know what roles they'll be playing. I would assume, well, I mean, it could go different ways. I mean, like one could, one of them or both of them could be, a principal or teacher. They could just be parents of, a student who's now going to Bayside, or what, but they'll both be involved. So it'll be kind of interesting because it will have a connection there. But we'll have to see just how far they're able to go with that, because Mark Paul Gosselaar is in a new drama on ABC, kind of like a, not exactly a spinoff of Blackish, but in the same kind of vein. It's called Mixedish.
I've seen billboards for that around here.
Yeah. So that's going to be on
Story or something.
It's like what?
It's like the wife of Blackish, like her story or something like that.
Maybe
her on the cover of the billboard, so I don't know.
Okay, maybe so. Yeah. So he's in that. Tiffany Amber Thiessen was in Suits a few years ago, I think. Or no.
Diamond.
It was maybe it was Suits. Yeah. The Dustin Diamond.
Dustin Diamond was in jail.
Dustin Diamond was in jail. So, that's the thing, is like, it would be kind of hard to bring back Screech. Well, it would be kind of hard to bring back Screech or Lisa, because they have had some real world problems.
Oh, that's right. Lisa has undergone some cosmetic changes.
Yeah, and just like
she was in soap operas or something the last I saw.
Yeah, I think that's been a while. Like, she's been kind of like unstable. So I'm not sure exactly, what we'll get with that, but you know what? It'll all be worth it. Well, I think I said this to you, like, if you think about all the crappy Saved by the Bell stuff that we've gotten since then, like Saved by the Bell, the college years, even like,
the new class,
the new class, and even some of the stuff like where they had that final year of high school that like turned out to like not really happen, where it was like, they ended up continuing the show a year after they thought it was going to end. And so Tiffany Amber Thiessen and Elizabeth Berkley left the show.
And so then
the Tory year, she came in, and then that just turned out to like not be real or something, you know.
Yeah. They
And
just brought Kelly and Jesse back for graduation.
yeah,
She wasn't there.
it's just the strangest, just the strangest thing. And so it's not like Saved by the Bell is this like, you know, we've had this like classic, treasured, never been tarnished sort of property. So I'm not really worried about
Really
that.
nothing sacred about it.
And you got to think about that. You got to think about like it would all be worth it if they would just bring back for one episode Rod Belding,
Of course,
the greatest, coolest substitute teacher in the history
best
of
substitute of all time.
yeah
Yeah. I mean, who knows? Maybe he's working in the office of the governor.
yeah.
Because
No, Rod Belding is in prison
with Screech.
Yeah,
They're cellmates.
right.
I'm very intrigued at the reality that is going to be put before us, where Zach is running the state and Jesse is the principal of the high school.
Yeah.
Like, how far, unless they're really going to blend reality and fiction and have her be like Elizabeth Berkley, like she got busted for, you know, she got poorly received for doing some adult film or something like that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, then she wouldn't be allowed to be a principal, I guess. I don't know, but it's California, so who knows? I'm very confused.
Yeah.
And this premise really has my attention, but just in the wrong way.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to see how this plays out.
Yeah. Oh, I looked up Battlestar Galactica. Battlestar Galactica ended in January of 2010. It hasn't even been 10 years and we're rebooting already.
Wow.
I was thinking like, man, I don't think it's been that long. But it basically, it had a run like Lost. It started in...
That Lost ended in the same year, yeah.
Well, and
Lost
Battlestar Galactica started in 2004, which I think was the year that... So it was just... They just
identical.
Paralleled one another. Yeah. Yeah. So, man, I love it. But unless they're going to do something different with the story, that's just too soon to...
Because I would not be ready for a Lost reboot.
No. Oh my gosh,
so,
no.
Like,
no.
Just thinking about that time.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's weird.
Yeah. So I don't know. And that's another thing. Like when Netflix first came out and people were like, you know, quote unquote, cutting the cord to just go with Netflix, which was like pretty much the only legitimate kind of streaming service at the time. I was thinking like, man, this is great right now. But if this really does catch on, then what's going to happen is it's just going to be the same problem as, you know, television, where you have umpteen different streaming services that you've got to subscribe to. And then ultimately, you know, you're going to have to either, you know, pick one or two, or you're going to be like up paying the same kind of money that you would just for regular satellite or cable.
Or there's going to be services like the satellite services that will bundle all your streaming.
Oh yeah,
together, and you'll end up being cable all over again.
Right.
It'll just have a different name.
That's how cable is going to make its comeback. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. All of a sudden, Spectrum and DirecTV and all these places are going to cut all their plans, and they're just going to buy up subscriptions to all the streaming services and offer them to you that way.
Right.
And 10 of the streaming services are just going to be how to get, you know, Brazilian abs.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. And
right.
Infomercial streaming channels.
Yeah.
I mean, Disney's already starting that with
Hulu
and ESPN and Disney Plus.
Right.
Those
Which
are
is
all quality channels, though.
It is. Yeah. And it's a good deal.
And you have something like,
for the moment.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But
sure,
I'm already just like running this through my mind where it's like, all right, I got to have Disney, CBS, which I otherwise wouldn't care about, but they're going to have the Picard series. And then Warner is doing like a combo of like HBO and the DC streaming service.
Yeah.
Yeah. And whatever other properties they own. And then there's Netflix, which I still have to have for Stranger Things. And I'm just like running this through my mind of like all these services that I'm going to be paying for. So
yeah, it's quite a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So we spent a good 20 minutes on various nonsense. but I think we needed to address that stuff. But so now we need to get to This Is Us. So just to give people a little bit of a backstory, all of our mini viewers, you saw the first season of the show and then kind of just didn't kind of get around to watching the second season. Part of it was because you, if I'm remembering right, and I won't tell people what it is at first if they haven't seen the show, but there's a big thing that is going to happen kind of like early on in the show, and they don't get around to showing what it happens or how it happens in season one, and they're going to do it in season two. And with this being just sort of like a family drama, even though it's a good family drama, I think for some people it was just kind of like, well, where's this really going to go after that? Is that kind of part of what was the thing for you with not really kind of getting around to season two? You still there?
Like the appeal and everything, or
sorry, I think we just had a ton of
well, so yeah, This Is Us. It was I think I first saw an ad for it, I think maybe during the Super Bowl or something like that, and it was, can you hear me?
Yeah, it's yeah, I can hear you now. It's just it's a lot of lag.
Hello.
Yeah, apparently we're having some major lag.
Anything? I think you might be frozen now.
Okay. What about now? Yeah, this is kind of odd. Yeah, somehow we're kind of like off kilter here. I don't know who's
a lot of what. Sorry.
It's a lot of lag.
Lag.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah, we lost him there. Hopefully he'll be back in a second here. Maybe the connection will be better. So we'll just hang out here for a minute if anybody who's watching. All right. Let's see here. Add Steven back in. Okay.
Hey.
Okay. Yeah, I think I think you had some lag there. Yeah. So like
yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so what I was asking was just basically like in the show, that it's a time hopping show, and so right. This big event that's going to happen, and it's so was part of the thing for you kind of feeling like the show was centered around this, one, not really weighted completely on this one character, but obviously this one character was an important part of the show, and that character dies in the timeline at some point. And so, was part of that for you, like, just kind of like, well, where's this really going to go in season two? Was that kind of part of why you didn't really get back into season two after season one?
Yeah, the initial reason we didn't get back into it was the timing, really, of it airing. So, for people who may not be entirely familiar with any time I was a guest on any of our mutual friends' podcasts and stuff, is the year, pretty much the entire year of 2017 and the first half of 2018, my wife and I were spent on 2 different continents. So that was when season 2 aired live.
That's right. Yeah.
So it was a show that we watched together, and so we didn't really have the opportunity to watch it then. And then coming back, it was just time was just difficult to find shows that we wanted to watch together that we didn't really want the kids to watch with us. And that show really is an emotional payload every week. And but in really good ways. And so, in that regard, though, about that particular character, I was really drawn to that character in the first season because he was just portrayed in such this Captain America like
Hmm.
positive light. Like, I mean, there, every character had flaws, but not like in some sort of a unsympathetic sort of way, though.
Hmm.
And so, knowing that the inevitable was coming, it never really dawned on me until we came through season 2 that I realized, like, oh, the rules that this show sets in its universe for just jumping in and out of timelines, this is going to be such a niche, such a niche analogy, and I'm sorry, but this TV show, it's like the TV show version of a topical sermon. Like, they just take an issue almost in a show, and like there is some sort of a linear timeline going on, but they can just drop in at any point in the history of this family and discuss it. So
Right.
so you really, as characters might come and go, they never really leave. Um, in a way, which is actually kind of reassuring, in a way, because you don't have to fully grieve the loss of a character in a way,
Right.
if you're the kind of person who does that. And this show carries such an emotional impact. It is easy to grieve the loss of a character because one thing the show does really well is their realistic portrayal of all the emotions that it hits you with. Um, and there's just so many things they tackle in this show. It's kind of unbelievable that they balance them all so well.
Right. Right. Yeah. And I mean, just for me, like I've never like I'm trying to think what the last, maybe only other family drama is that I've ever really gotten into, and I think like it was basically like when I was a kid. Um, you remember that old show? I think it was called Life Goes On.
Oh yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
Is that
With
the one that had the Down syndrome kid in it?
Yeah, I think
Corky.
Corky. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's like the only other like family drama that I remember. I mean, like of course I grew up watching family sitcoms, like Growing Pains and
Hmm.
stuff like that. But I just never really like with most shows, with most dramas, I need some sort of action or mystery or something like that to kind of hook me in. And like just
You.
I'll
Yeah.
hmm? Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Sorry. No, go.
Um, I think just a lot of the family drama stuff just feels like just too real. Like I'm just looking for some sort of escape, and I'm just like, yeah, I'm not really in on this. Um,
You. Yeah. You bringing up Life Goes On reminded me of the Wonder Years. I think that came on at a similar time.
yeah, that's
Um,
true. That's true. It was,
and
yeah,
that was set in the 60s though. So like I never felt that much of a close personal connection with any of the emotion in that show,
yeah.
because it was so far removed.
Hmm.
Um, but the most recent family drama I watched is actually almost like a spiritual relative of This Is Us, called Parenthood,
Hmm.
that came on, which was another show that we didn't finish. um, that show was ending right before This Is Us started, I think, and we got like 2 seasons behind because the emotion in one of those shows got so hard.
Mm,
I didn't want to watch it anymore. Like, I actually waited a whole nother season to see if that story, and like read online to see if that storyline that I was so upset about resolved itself in a positive way,
yeah.
which it did. So at one point, one day, we'll probably go back and finish the show. But I was not happy about it, and again, it's just family dramas, man. Like, is so ripe for you to be able to see yourself or see your family
Hmm.
in so many characters,
Hmm.
when they're done well. And you know what? That's actually kind of a comforting thought that so many people can see themselves in these characters universally. It kind of tells us that maybe we're not all as different as we think we are, despite people wanting to tell us that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, family dramas are not easily delved into.
True. True. Well, and you bring up an interesting point because um, I think like, yeah, normally, like, with any show or movie, you identify with a character in some way, or, especially with a TV show with an ensemble cast, really kind of see yourself in one of those characters. I think maybe that I really just kind of just now realized this, like, I think there again, like, This Is Us is kind of an outlier for me, maybe in that, like, I don't really have a character that I am like, oh yeah, that character is me, so that's kind of interesting, because normally that's a lot of the appeal, for me with a show.
I would say for me in that show, I wouldn't necessarily say there is a character that is me in that show, but there are pieces of characters that I certainly resonate with. And I would say there are multiple characters in that show that I see myself in that I aspire to be.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and so I think there's a couple of male characters in there that I see, and I'm like, man, like there's part of me in that, and like Milo Ventimiglia's character is such a just a very respectfully written father figure in
Hmm.
that show. Like
Hmm.
I'm sure just I don't think I can think of a dad of multiple kids that I've met that wouldn't want to be Jack and at least in one or two ways.
Hmm.
Just well written as a character, at least in that role, in the fatherly role.
Hmm.
Um, and so there's a lot of aspiration in those characters, but also too like it is not this show is not in any way like paints painting a unrealistic picture. I just so
Right.
their depictions of everybody's flaws are so
Yeah.
so accurate and respectful at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. And part of, like, as you get into season 3 more too, I mean, I think you start to get kind of a better and like fuller picture of the characters too. I mean, even it's already, I think done a good job of that with the characters, but I think season 3 really kind of takes that to another level. Um, but yeah, just I guess kind of to go back and tell people, for people who haven't seen This Is Us, just kind of like the overview is, yeah, it follows a family, a single family, the Pearsons, and you start out, like, the pilot episode was, you didn't really know, it was shot in a way that you didn't really know it was in multiple timelines, and you didn't know that 3 of the characters that you were focusing on were the children of 2 of the other characters in the show. So it's Jack and Rebecca, the couple who are having their kids, triplets, in the, I guess, would be like right around 1980 or so.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
1980.
yeah, and so then basically, but then the show actually goes back, can go all the way back before that to the time when Jack himself was a kid, in sort of shorter, briefer flashes. So it's something that can go anywhere from like the 60s to present day. Well, beyond present day. So um, um, but so these 3, the story is that one of their triplets dies in childbirth, and they adopt a um, African American baby boy that has been left at the hospital, or who was taken in, I think, left at a fire station, and taken there by the firefighter. And so they, especially Jack, is the one who kind of drives this and feels like they're supposed to have 3 kids, and so they adopt him. And then you follow him, Randall, and then the 2 biological siblings, Kevin and Kate, in all throughout their childhood, and then in present day. And I think that kind of hits the highlight of the premise. Wouldn't you say? I mean, basically beyond that, it's just sort of like following the individual, you know, I guess sort of the individual highs and lows of the, the characters' lives, the things they struggle with, and things like that.
Yeah, yeah. The opening episode is essentially just establishing each of the siblings as individual characters and what they're dealing with. Kevin is this, typecast sitcom actor who I swear, based on the premise of his show, is on CBS. And
that's true. It would be a CBS show.
The Manny would have been a CBS show, easy.
For sure. It would have like aired like right after that the one that that Matt LeBlanc did recently. What was it? Man, I don't know, Man Up, or I don't know. It was something like that.
That sounds like a CBS show.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kate is so she's like very obese, and she's dealing with like overeating issues, and trying to do that. And something I didn't notice until today, Jared, I was going to find the episode order to like reorient my mind. Every season premiere is on their birthday.
Oh, I hadn't paid attention.
So the first episode is when they're born as babies, and season 2 and season 3 is on their birthdays. So they start all start on their birthdays. Just kind of start out the year, I guess.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, and so parallel, you've also got Milo Ventimiglia plays Jack, and Mandy Moore plays his wife Rebecca, and she's pregnant, with the triplets and stuff, and so she's going into labor, and like the show just brilliantly in their ad campaigns and stuff just made it seem like this sort of ensemble show where these multiple threads are all just going at once or whatever. And it's not until the very end of the first episode where you see the siblings call each other on the phone to wish each other happy birthday. You realize they're related, and then it cuts back and they finally show you like a television from the day that they're born, and you can see that it's like 30 some years ago.
Yeah.
Like, no.
And like,
way.
and people, and I think people are like smoking in the hospital and stuff like that.
Yeah. And all this stuff. And then all of a sudden everything just becomes apparent.
Yeah.
That this happened a long time ago, and these are actually their parents, and all this stuff. And so they do a really good job of sort of, So like they establish kind of who the characters are in the very beginning, just the nature of their personalities and how they interact with one another and stuff. And they just kind of dig a little deeper into each individual character in the context of living with the others as it goes along. And so it's kind of hard to describe what the show's about, other than it's just about the family kind of living their life.
Right.
And they each have goals and things they're wanting to do. Like, Kevin has this Charlie Sheen like meltdown in the first episode on the set of the sitcom, because he wants to be a serious actor and not just a sitcom actor. I can't actually remember where Kate really gets started, but she deals with some things that have to do with, her eating disorders and stuff. And then,
I think she's attending,
and then Randall.
Yeah. I think Kate was attending the, like the support group and like meeting Toby.
Oh yeah. And that's where she met Toby. Yeah, that's right. And so, and then, Randall tracks down his biological father.
Right.
In the first episode.
Yeah.
And so that really is his story thread for the first season, is connecting with his biological father.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, man, it's an incredible show. And like, it is an interesting, that they've done an interesting job of like sort of establishing, like just through the dropping along of hints or establishing of certain scenes, like, oh, like when I see this scene happen or this character be introduced in this way, I'm like, something major has happened in this family that they haven't told us about yet. And like,
Yeah.
why is this way? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then that like gets you like really like worked up about stuff. And so one thing I'll say, you know, I think we're at the point where we can kind of talk about this, right? Or I think
Yeah. Yeah.
40
Yeah.
minutes in. So,
Right.
you know, the big deal is that Jack, the father, dies at some point.
Mhm.
And the kids grow up without their father, and like that has done a number on all three kids as well as his wife.
Right.
And so that's a lot of like the nerve center of a lot of the issues they all have is how that happened, what were the circumstances of it happening, and how has everybody dealt with it since
Right.
then.
Right.
And one of the things in season one, before you know that Jack actually died, you see that Mandy Moore is now with his best friend,
Mhm.
Miguel, as you know, older people. And so it's like when they go to Thanksgiving or something, he shows up, and we're all like, hold on,
Yeah.
like, wait, so did she leave him?
Right.
Did he leave her? Like, what's what, you know? And at that moment, because at that point you didn't even know that he died,
Right.
like, and at that, you know, and so once they finally reveal that, like, Kate's the one I think to reveal it, because she says like it's my fault that he's dead at some point, and we're like, and it's so weird. It's like that's so tragic, and at the same time, I'm like, oh, he's dead. Okay, that's why.
Right.
It's just
Right.
it's all so terrible and emotional. But but the way that they played that out though is, you know, they were able to introduce like her
Mhm.
current marital situation,
Yeah.
and draw that out in drama. And then, you know, it wasn't until halfway through season 2 that they actually addressed the circumstances
Yeah.
behind his death and everything, and
Yeah.
which was really hard and stuff
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. Well, even more than that, it was like, you know, I think episode like 14 of 18 or something. So it was
Oh
like,
yeah,
you
it's
know,
really close to the end.
three quarters of the way through the season. Yeah, I still need to go back and watch all of season 1, because I've seen parts of season 1, but you know, I had so many people that are like, "Oh, you need to see This Is Us. You need to see This Is Us." And I watched bits and pieces of the first season, but I'm like, you know, I just, I'm not, you know, just wasn't that big on family dramas. And like the year that it premiered was just a crazy year for me. I'd gone back to school, and, you know, you know, between working and school and everything else, it was just like, I just had no time whatsoever. And so I saw like little bits and pieces, but then the next year, like life had kind of calmed down. And for the first time, I was like just home on, you know, weeknights and stuff like that. And, you know, didn't have a ton of stuff to do. And so I'm like, okay, you know, I saw a little bit of it. I'll, you know, get started fresh with season 2. I know enough about what happened that I don't feel like I have to go back. And it's not like Lost, where you would, you know, if you try to jump in Lost at the beginning of season 2 and you haven't seen season 1, you
Oh
know,
my.
good luck, you know.
Right. Yeah.
So I felt, you know, like, okay, we'll just start fresh with this. And so like I enjoyed it. And but then there was, you know, sort of a moment toward the end of season 2 where I'm like, okay, that's interesting. All right, now I'm in. You know, now I'm in for like the long run of it. And so that was when, you know, when they finally get around to the episode of how Jack died. And then there's, you know, of course, separate subplots going on. And they do basically what Lost did. They don't do it, of course, nearly as dramatically as Lost did it, but they do a sneaky flash forward where you don't know that you're seeing the future until you see this character, you know, until you see Randall appear as an older man, and you're like, oh, you know. And even at that time, I didn't know, like, okay, was this just part of a storyline to like show kind of, oh, in the future she becomes this, or are we really going to like continue with this and revisit this in a meaningful way? And then when we get to the season finale, then they show you another piece of it, you know, and then they show you, they tease it more, where they're talking about, where it's Randall and his adult daughter, Tess, talking about it's time to go see her. And so at that point, that was when I realized, like, okay, this really is going to be like, they're actually building towards something here. So, so that's when it became, a lot more, exciting for me, because, with a show, I mean, I just want to know, okay, you're going somewhere with this. I don't want to invest and then, get no real payoff to anything. So that was kind of the moment that it really kind of like hooked me in.
Yeah. I mean, it certainly got me from the beginning, and that sort of thing. And this is why, like, it's really cool that you could even now still go back and watch season 1, and it would still give you like new information. Or there are things you could experience for the first time. Because one thing that they haven't really embraced a lot since season 1 was they really leaned hard into Randall and his birth father's relationship, that they haven't really circled back around to. So there's some fresh material there, like if you're jumping in late onto the show. And then also, like, when you told me that, I was like, oh, because or when we talked about it, it had me thinking about a scene from season 1 where Kevin has painted this painting, and he's talking to Randall's daughters about it, and it's sort of this sort of illustration for sort of the mission
circle of life.
Yeah, I mean, really, it's just like, it's just this mess of art that he's painted, but he says it's something he does when he's stressed and everything. But he was just talking about how he sees everyone outside of time, like in his family. He's like, maybe we're on opposite sides of this paper, but we're all still here. We're all kind of here at the same time. And that's kind of how the show treats itself. It's like, it just lets you see kind of everything all at once. And that wouldn't work for a whole lot of shows, but this show handles it really well and executes it really well. And so yeah, I'm very curious as to who she is and stuff. I've certainly got theories. I wouldn't say I necessarily have theories. It can pretty much only be like one of 3 people,
right?
From what I've seen.
Yeah, so because you've seen theory. Yeah. So because you've now seen.
Yeah, I've seen enough to know that Toby is a part of this conversation now too, and that's as far as I've gotten into that little thread.
Yeah,
Randall also calls Toby, so I'm like, okay, well, it's either Beth or Kate or Rebecca, I guess. Like, because it's what I'm thinking at the moment based on how they're setting it up. But
and so you're still you've made it through. Are you still on that 3rd episode of the season, or did you finish it?
I am early into season 3. I would have to look up real quick to see which one I'm on, because we tend to watch 2 or 3 episodes in one shot when we have time to go through it, and so I can't quite remember which one it is, but
I think the one where you told me, if it's still the one you told me before, I think that's episode 3. I just wasn't sure if you had moved on from it at all yet.
We are, let's see, episode 3. Let's see. No, what am I even looking at here?
Well, it doesn't matter. You may stumble across spoilers if you look too hard there.
Yeah, no, I'm not gonna try to go too hard. Yeah, no, I'm still in the 3rd episode. It looks like the 4th one's about Vietnam, and I'm not there yet.
Yeah.
So there we go.
Yeah.
Cool.
And that's not really anything that you don't already know either. You know from the end of season 2, where there was, I thought there were kind of great speeches there by Kevin and Randall both, and Randall's is focused on the future and not really knowing what's going to happen, but you of course we do know what's going to happen because they let us see it. And so so you get to see Kevin and Zoe flying to well, you see him on a plane, and then the captain comes over the PA system and says, that they're, descending into Vietnam, and you see Kevin looking at a photo of his dad and his company there, I guess. And so you do know that that's going to be a part of season 3. And then I guess you said you had seen the NPR interview that Kevin did where he's
he just realizes he doesn't really know anything about his dad's time in war. And like, I mean, they take you back to those flashbacks of him as a kid, almost like, I don't know if it's like Kevin putting the pieces together and letting us see that, or if it's just showing us that, like, Jack, or Vietnam veterans, like, went through such hell because, like, they weren't worshipped. Like, I mean, no disrespect to current military members, but obviously it's a very different climate and a different respect for modern military versus Vietnam veterans. They were not welcomed back, and everything, and the trauma of war in general versus the expectation maybe of masculinity and vulnerability and stuff. Like, he didn't talk about war, and he was clearly affected by it, and still fighting to be this really good dad too at the same time. And so he was very averse to talking about those sorts of things. And he even tells me anymore when he's like taking her on a date and stuff, like, I was in the war, it wasn't good, I don't like to talk about it. It's like, one reason I like you so much is because I feel like I can just be comfortable with somebody. And so in that, Kevin realizes he just never, and I can resonate with that too. Like, you lose a parent, and one day you just wake up and realize there were things you never thought to ask them, and now you don't have a chance to do it. And I don't resonate with Kevin very much on the show, on the whole. But in those moments, I was like, I know how he feels. And so he's just like driven to try to find that out. And in those moments, like, where someone's asking him all these questions, and he's like, wow, like, those are all really good questions. I wish I knew the answer to them, and I don't, because I never asked.
If there was a character that I kind of resonated with more, and really for the first 2 or so seasons, it wouldn't have been, again, like, nobody. To me, in some ways, and again, this isn't a spoiler, but in some ways, I think Kevin becomes, I've heard other people say this too, like, maybe not necessarily the most interesting character for the show overall, but I think his season 3 arc makes him much more interesting and compelling, and takes him from being probably either the weakest or I don't know. I probably wouldn't have put him below Kate, even on his bad days. But from
Kate is a bit of a jerk, but even with all she's been through.
But it takes him from being one of the weakest characters in the show to, I think, one of the more interesting characters in the show. And so you do get to see sides to him that you didn't really know were there, and he just kind of hid that.
It's interesting you would say that, because I feel as though they maybe gift a little bit of depth to each sibling as the season goes along. Because I'd say the real weight of the story in the modern day was carried by Randall in season 1. And for what it's worth, I think they tried to grace Kate with that in season 2. But I would argue that Randall pulled it off again to be more interesting. But I mean, that's not like the actor's fault. And maybe that's, my own life experience and dealing with, like, foster care and adoption being more interesting to me rather than, what she was dealing with instead. And to hear you say that about Kevin in season 3, it seems almost as if they're kind of like divvying out the meaty roles of it or something. But I don't know. I don't know if I'm imagining that, or if there's something to that. But
no, I think you're right. I think you're right. Seasons within a story do have to have, kind of a focus, and you can't really focus equally on characters, generally within an episode or within a season. I think there's ensemble casts where you hope it kind of evens out by the end of the series, but you have to have a focus for an episode and even, for a story arc within a season. So I think you're right on that. I think it has kind of been along those lines. But season three is definitely my favorite for different reasons. But so I guess, like, how much, one thing to go back to season two, one thing that happens within season two is Randall and Beth get into foster parenting, and it's very quickly, like, focused on one, one foster daughter. With you having, ultimately adopted 4 children, how much of that, I mean, obviously I'm sure that, resonated with you, but did you, find a lot of, specific stuff that, you could really, I guess, relate to in terms of some of that experience of, having, older children come into your life that way?
Yeah. I mean, and that's, one thing I was thinking of and I was alluding to earlier, just about how well they handle complex topics and how resonant, truthfully resonant their experiences are, which what makes the show so emotionally impactful. Um, yeah, Allison and I went through foster training as well, and we were actually getting certified for that when the news broke that we were actually able to bring our most recent 2 children home. And so we went through that certification with a lot of families in our church, and so we're close with some families who are still fostering now too. And man, so much of I just can't commend that show well enough for how responsibly they handled that topic, for good and bad. Like the um, the messiness of it all,
Mm-hmm.
like how hard it was for them to kind of connect with her, and even like when she was sort of getting closer to them but wouldn't show it, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
was something. uh, I was really, really excited isn't really the right word, but I felt really happy about it in a way. They'd have this scene where, first of all, Allison and I really joked about it because we we have a lot of Randall and Beth in our relationship. I think, in as much as Randall was like super excited about
Oh.
pushing forward in this,
Yeah.
and she was not.
Yeah.
And I was Beth at that
Oh, okay.
phase of things. And then Beth buckles down and she's like, all right, we're going to do this thing.
Yeah.
Then let's do this thing.
Yeah.
And then he becomes insecure about it,
Mm,
which is when
interesting.
I was Beth again in that situation. So like we kind of like switch places in our readiness sometimes. And that's marriage for you, like you pick each other up and one of you has to be the anchor at some point
Yeah.
and pull people along. But when she there's a scene where she goes to like a park downtown or something, and she's looking at these teenagers and stuff. And at this point, all they had agreed to do is to adopt or foster or whatever. And you're presuming from all the language they're going to adopt a baby, just like how Randall was adopted.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, and she's looking at all these teenage kids and stuff in the park. She's like, there's so many older kids who are just overlooked in the foster system, and like, what are they? And I can't really remember all of the illustrations she was giving about it and how it tied into what was going on in the episode per se, but it was such a to overuse a weird word. It was such a blessing to like hear that in TV. Like that is such a big deal. Like because there's the stigma of adoption. There's lots of stigmas about adoption that maybe mean well but don't help and stuff. And so and one of the ways to address that too is just the avoidance of pursuing infants and infants only for that. And then also the reality too that pursuing an older child, wow, that is a noble pursuit. It's one that you're kind of willingly recognizing as very difficult. And then I'm also glad too that like I think a lesser show, one wouldn't have probably dealt with older child fostering. Two, perhaps would have like skipped the hard stuff. I would say skipped all the hard stuff, but had lesser hard stuff going on to the point where Tasia comes around, a little bit to like them as parents. And also this show dealt with the real feelings, I think, of a foster parent thinking, well, you know what, I'm doing a better job of parenting than you are. And wrestling with like their love for the child, but also the foundational existence and purpose for foster care is to just care for a child until their biological parent is prepared to take them back. And that is the motivation behind it. And that is the reason why it exists. And that should be our ideal resolution, although that doesn't always happen. And so there is, and I think this was in season 3, so I might be skipping ahead. I can't really remember, but
that's okay.
Randall and Deja are having this conversation about, that they're basically, her mother ends up terminating her parental rights and they're looking to formally adopt her. And she points out, she's like, you keep saying that we're the same and that you know how I feel, but you had 2 dads who really wanted you. And none of my parents wanted me at all. And like, oh man, that's so real. And so hard. And she has this moment too, at the end of season 2, where I think it's when Randall's giving his speech, like they're doing this little montage and she goes and she takes a baseball bat to the car.
Yeah. That was the season two finale.
Yeah. And I'm like, at first I was like, oh no. But at the same time, I'm like, no, that's legit. Like, I mean, not knowing how to handle your emotions and sort of reverting to this kind of behavior. I mean, when I say it's legit, I don't mean, like every single foster kid or that, but like anything like that. But man, just the way that they've handled that storyline was so responsible and so unafraid to really expose some of the more difficult things to deal with when entering into that. And also like coming back around too, though, and showing in light of all those hard things, also showing all those really rewarding things too. Like, so like, yeah, this is really hard and difficult and maybe a little scary, but also, yeah, it is worth it. And then that can happen,
right.
And stuff. So and anyway, just that entire element of the show was really resonant with us. I mean, especially, with what we've been through in our family, but also like, it's just not, that facet of family life is not something that gets explored that much in television or movies. Movies, you don't really have a lot of runtime to really get into the nitty gritty of all that responsibly, but in television, you just don't see it that much, really explored. And man, when this show chooses to explore a topic, they really do their homework, I'd say. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm paying attention. I just got I'm working on a Windows computer and it's trying to do that thing where like, oh, hey, by the way, we're going to shut down at 11:27 for you. So
we approximately need to do 75 minutes worth of updates
right
now.
Yeah. So I was just like having to go through to make sure that it wasn't just gonna randomly shut off at a time that I did not tell it to. What's funny is like it gave the option to, restart now. And I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. So I clicked the pick a time thing. And then I thought that meant that I would pick a time. Apparently that meant that it would just pick a time. and so then it went away, and then it just popped back up like, yeah, okay, we're going to shut down at 11:27 to do those updates. Like, yeah, no, that's a little too early. Yeah, I don't think we're
computer's giving you the wrap it up music.
It is. Yeah, it's like, gosh. Let's wrap that up. Let's wrap it up.
All right. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Governor Zach Morris.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, they do treat that storyline in a very mature way. And I think they treat everything, within the show in a realistic sort of way. And that's part of the reason that I love television. Is like within the course of a 2-hour movie, you see these character changes, and coming from I think this is something that anybody could observe, but especially, with me too, having like, part of a background in psychology, like change is very hard, and change does not happen in short order. And, so I always have preferred television over movies, because the character arcs and changes feel much more organic, to me 99% of the time. So, with a lot of stuff in this show, it's sort of one step forward, two steps back at times before they end up, taking more steps forward. But what I like about this show is that, I think it always has a hopeful, sort of attitude or tone, even when there are, sad events or, bumps in the road, I always just feel like the overall tone of the show is that, like, things are going to work out eventually in some way, and maybe not exactly in the way that you want them to or expect them to, but there's going to be a silver lining, somehow. And I think just sort of, you pointed out the thing about, Beth having to kind of steer Randall out of, like, Randall was wanting to, adopt a baby to sort of like duplicate his own experience, and, I kind of have always seen that with, people in life, and especially, with both of us coming from, we both went to, a Christian college and have been, grown up, surrounded by people of faith. But I think a lot of times the mistake I see is that people are basically trying to write their own story, and I mean, we all write our own story, but like they've got a very, on one hand, they're saying like, I'm just here to do God's will, but that's not really like, they're very much like charging ahead,
on
trying
my terms.
Yes. Right. They're very much like trying to steer where this goes, and they're seeing like this is what's meant to be, this is how it's supposed to be. And no matter if there's like, just red flags like flying and hitting them in the face, that, it's like, nope, this is it. This is what it's supposed to be, because this is what I want. And, so I liked that it, it steered, away from that with them, fostering, an older child. And then, they sort of did that again when they lead you to think that, Deja, the girl, is out of the picture, and that they're going to be getting, another foster child. And then that's kind of where they pull another switcheroo on you, where it's like, oh no, you thought you were watching a social worker set up another child for them. This is actually their biological daughter, Tess, in the future, who's a social worker, setting up, a fostering or adoption or whatever for another family.
the framing of the episode leads you to believe that her experience with Deja is what inspired her to do that.
Right.
To choose that path and stuff as well, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Sort of passing along that legacy
Right.
as a family for
Right.
her to do that. And yeah, you know, yeah, trying to be Neo, so to speak, the master of your own destiny, there is not as realistic as one might think, and that kind of foolhardiness can certainly cause more problems than it can solve. I'd say. I think there's a certain leverage, a certain latitude in that approach a little bit. You know, like say like, yeah, you know, I'm definitely going to adopt or whatever. But like, you know, if you're going to take that approach, you need to hold that. It's like to go back to say, you know, people of faith and stuff. There's a phrase I've heard. This like you need to hold your dreams out with open hands. And that it's totally fine to have visions and aspirations, what you want for the future, but you wouldn't want to hold them so tightly that you're going to derail, you know, or forsake what's truly important about being who you are or being who you're called to be in order to have that.
Right.
Because, you know, for I'm going to stop tiptoeing around the language because it's too late. I'm too tired. So I'm just going to say it in the most comfortable way possible for my own language. You know, God may want certain things for you, but and may even plant dreams in your heart even. But just because he planted a dream in your heart when you're 7 or 8 years old or something doesn't necessarily mean that he's not going to transform that idea by the time you're 20 or 30.
Right.
And he could have given you one drive just to get you to a certain place so he could change it and give you a different perspective later on.
Right.
And also like we are often guilty, I think, of filling in the holes or filling in the gaps of the story when we don't have a whole lot of places to go, because God is notoriously ambiguous, especially in scripture when it comes to giving people commands to do things. Like we even now, you know, we can look back and see love your neighbor, and boy, do we add a lot of caveats to that in 2019 America.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, not actually. I think it's a little simpler than what we made it. Just do it, you know.
Right.
But anyway, that's another conversation for another day. But yeah, you know, so it's interesting to again, just going back to This Is Us. Like I appreciate the balance that it brings to these topics, and how, like you say, how it kind of ends with hope, you know. And in a weird, clever sort of way, at the very end of the first season, which was also a little hard because it ended on a down note, because
sort of, yeah.
you had learned some elements about the fact that Jack was going to die. You had learned a couple of his flaws. You had learned that certain characters claimed to have had certain involvement in it, and you were set up to think that maybe you were going there. Like, and we didn't know. And it turns out that was a red herring, and that's not what happened.
Yeah.
But there's a conversation that Jack and Rebecca have, and they have like a knockdown, drag out argument, and some things were said that again felt very real. Some of these things that resonate in this show shouldn't, and they do, and it's not great. But when you think that they're just like at this impasse, and she sends him away to go stay somewhere else for the night, and that's the finale of the season, he stops and he just says, you know, our love story is only just beginning, or something like that. Which, from a narrative standpoint, is really true. Like, even though you know he's not going to live for a whole lot longer in a linear sense, they're still like the first episode of season 3 is the story of their first date. So, like, you know, it's cool. It's like, you know, he's like, and now, you know, I even made an observation, like trying to like sift through this story with Allison, because like there's this other guy in the picture right now. And I said, you know what? It's so, I said, this is so comforting to me that this is a non-linear story, so I don't have to worry about whoever this guy is. I'm like,
Yeah.
and she's like, yeah. And I said, he's basically Ryan Gosling in The Notebook. is
Oh,
is who Jack is. Just like this guy who's like, too poor for her, but
yeah.
he's got her heart, even if he
Right.
doesn't have a wallet.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah. 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 So what are you're a few episodes into season 3, or almost 3 episodes into season 3. So do you have um any sort of ideas or hopes, or kind of what you're going to see in season 3, or where the story is going? Of course I already know all this stuff. We're a couple of weeks away from the start of season 4, and they're actually promising like something big, like early in season 4, that's going to change things. So I'm like a little bit nervous about that, but
yeah.
We'll see. But yeah, I was just kind of curious to see, since it's almost kind of like, the audience having knowledge that a character doesn't, or something, and like, oh, how's that character? But it's the audience, and part of the audience having knowledge that part of the other audience doesn't have. So I was just curious to see like what you're kind of hoping for this season, or expecting.
Yeah, I expect in some form or fashion for that flash forward scene to play out a little bit more. I'm interested to see what is happening there and what that's leading to. I am interested in Jack's relationship with his brother. I say that with some hesitation because it seems like it's going to end in a heartbreak for sure. Um, since currently I'm under the impression that his brother died in Vietnam. Um, uh, you know, with everybody else, I'm just kind of along for the ride, a little bit. So it's not that I'm looking for anything specific out of them, but I'm just interested to see where it goes. Um, I'm, I really like Toby as an individual character, but like the Toby Kate part of the show, I mean, it's fine. It's not bad, but it doesn't draw me in like all the other parts do.
Right.
And I'll say one thing that I'm really impressed with is that is Miguel as a character. Because you go back and watch him in season 1, like, oh gosh, we all like, I just hated him so much. Like it's kind of like like you as the viewer are Kevin at the beginning of the show in regards to how he views Miguel. And Kevin actually has a few conversations with Miguel, one in season 1 and then one in season 2, I think. And it's a really interesting dynamic that paints him in a very interesting, respectful picture that kind of completes sort of, all the distrust and all this implicit distrust you had in his character when you first sort of met him in the beginning of the show is kind of now rounded out. And you're like, oh, he really, it basically just puts you at ease that like he never had anything like illicit going on with Rebecca.
Right.
And like he really only did reach out to her after Jack died.
Right.
And there was such a cool thing too, like, and I think this was season 2, like Kevin was really, he just hates Miguel, and the way he kind of hates Miguel as a stepdad is also really endearing to the just their dynamic is really funny. There it's almost like a Michael Scott and Toby relationship, sort of thing. And he I think he asks Miguel, like, did you ever have feelings for my mom, while she was married to my dad? And he was just like, he looked appalled, and he was just like, no. He's like, your dad was my best friend. And he's like, and when they were together, like you couldn't think of one of them without the other. Like, I thought of them as a unit,
right.
Everything. And I'm like, thank you for saying that out loud in the real world. Like, that's because that's what marriage is, like people become a union and stuff. And I'm like, that's, again, there are some very well-read, well-adjusted people writing for this show. I feel like I don't know, and I hope those people don't get fired, whoever they are.
Yeah.
But it's a really well-read show. So yeah. Anyway, there's all kinds of cool things I'm showing you. Interesting things I'm looking forward to, and hopefully I can catch up before we get too far behind once season 4 starts. But
yeah,
see how it goes.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be that would be good if you could. That would be cool if you could somehow, like, at some point in season 4, like, catch up. Then I would feel like I've got, I don't know, maybe I don't want that. Maybe, I'd feel like, oh, my
I'll
power's
pace
gone
myself.
now. Yeah. But yeah, you've already gotten sort of a taste of, um, you know, of some of the things with basically where it's, headed in season 4 with, with some of the stuff with what, Randall and Beth's plans are. And yeah, I think part of the reason I did like season 3 so much was it was just something different too with, again, we already know, the Vietnam, sort of side of things where, they did, and they went, and, they actually went and filmed there, so it's not just like, um, crappy sound stages or close-ups or, on
Right.
some ferns in the background or something like that. So,
So Tropic Thunder set piece.
right, exactly. And again, like with me, um, it's kind of like I'm not. Again, it's funny that I like This Is Us because I'm not big on like prequels, and there's a prequel sort of element to this with all the flashback stuff. And so, you wouldn't think, like, with what, like, because we already, the show has established, certain things, in that, this didn't go well, for Jack. This is where his brother died. This is where, this is a time of his life that, he just doesn't want to deal with. um but you get it, like, with viewing it through multiple timelines, you get the sort of the juxtaposition of, sort of his experience there with Kevin's experience of, going and finding out about, about his dad. So, it's that part's really cool. And, yeah, all the other storylines, they deliver on those too. So, yeah, so it's my favorite season. So
Cool. Cool. Well, yeah, we've got several more episodes to go, but so far so good. I'm enjoying it. So
yeah.
here's to more seasons.
Yeah. All right. Well, and we know it's going to go at least 6. They've said
All
that.
right.
So, what's the guy's name? Daniel. Well, okay, never mind. I'm not going to remember his name. Fogelman. I think it's Dan Fogelman. He's the showrunner that says, it's going to go. He's got like a 6-year arc, and it could go beyond that, but it's probably going to be 6. Maybe they end up realizing, oh yeah, we've got another season of material here or something. But so we're about, halfway through the storyline, and it was kind of funny. It was kind of funny because there's going back to the parallel to Lost of the flash forwards and stuff, like, there's at the beginning of season 4 of Lost, I think it's Ben that says, like, if you do this is the beginning of the end or something like that. And that's the title of the episode. And that was like after we had found out that Lost was going to go for, like 3 truncated seasons and end and all that. And so it was very, almost like borderline breaking the fourth wall. And there's a character that says at, like in the middle of season 3, like, maybe maybe this is not the end. Maybe we're just in the middle, and so it felt kind of, yeah, like a larger kind of commentary on the show. So, yeah, so yeah, I'm looking forward to you seeing or getting through the rest of it and seeing what you think of it. But anyway, I appreciate you joining in and having a talk on this stuff, because I've wanted like somebody to talk about, or someone to talk this stuff over with, because I love the show, and there's nobody else I know that
conversation was a long time coming.
It was a long,
very persistent, and and having us have this conversation. And
just
it wasn't for a lack of desire. It was just like
right.
just one of those shows. It was hard to catch up with because we were a whole season behind. So
Yeah.
yeah, it is just it was funny. I should show you guys our Facebook.
And it's probably like I know, right? And it's probably like the weirdest kind of peer pressure, because like you go through high school and like, don't you want to just try this, drink? Like just have a little sip of it, just try this drink or try this cigarette, It's like, Steven, don't you want to watch another episode of This Is Us? I mean, everybody.
How many episodes do you think you can watch?
Everybody's doing it. Everybody's doing it, man. You don't want to look like a dork and not watch This Is Us. Come on. I mean, just one more.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it's probably weird to get This Is Us like peer pressure from your friends, but
there should be more of it though. I mean, if there's a show worth binging, I mean, that's definitely binging. I don't know if there's a show worth getting into though. By all means.
Right.
That's excellent. Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like most of the things that I'm like I don't like push hard with people on many things, but if it's something I do, I'm like rarely do I get a situation where it's like, oh man, you really like hype that up and it didn't deliver or something, So most of the time I feel okay about like pushing people to like we saw when I was down visiting Ford over the weekend, I got him to watch. Have you ever seen The Mist? The movie?
That's been remade a couple of times, hasn't it? Or
I don't know if it was a remake. There's been like similar movies. Like there's one called The Fog. It's one of those titles that, I think.
Is this the one with Shannon from Lost in that one? The Mist?
No.
Maybe she was in The Fog.
Yeah, I'm not sure. This one had Thomas Jane, and it actually had a lot of the Walking Dead cast in it.
I've definitely heard of it.
Yeah,
I just
it's I wanted Ford to watch it for a specific reason. It was he had a sort of a podcast where he was talking about a specific subject that is really relevant to it. So anyway, but I'm like, you got to watch the whole thing. Like you got to this isn't a great movie. It isn't even really a good movie, but like you got to make it like through the end to really get the whole experience. And so after he saw it, it was like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, that's good. So anyway, but yeah, I just I enjoy sort of experiencing. I think just sort of motion pictures are just a great sort of vehicle to experience just certain things through. And so if I find something that I like and I think it'll resonate with somebody else, I'll just basically become annoying trying to get them to watch it. So
I did just look it up, and I do remember yeah, I never saw it, but I did like get on a kick one time and start reading like about movies that I knew I was never going to see or something like that. And I remember reading about the ending to that. I'm like, oh gosh, what a gut punch! Like, so that's what I was thinking of when you said that. I was like, is that? I didn't want to be like, hey, is that the one at the end?
Yeah.
Really like,
right.
Yeah. It is that one. Okay.
It is that one. Yeah. So yeah. So yeah. Right. So, but yeah, that was just an hour and a half worth of his time where I've pressured you guys into a much larger commitment here. So
thanks for pressuring me into a more optimistic content.
Oh gosh. Yeah. Infinitely more optimistic. Can you imagine if like every episode of This Is Us was like The Mist?
Gosh, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So I'm going to tell you my wife.
No, for sure not. All right, man. Well, thanks again. And we'll come back and do one of these once you've finished season 3, so we can really kind of have a full like wrap up to like roughly where we are in the This Is Us universe.
All right, man. Sounds good.
All right. Have a good night.
Same to you, man.